Israeli Foreign Ministry today decried a distorted and false report and said that 3 individuals, so referring to the Commission of Inquiry, 3 individuals serving as Hamas proxies, notorious for their openly anti-Semitic positions.
These reports should be taken seriously, but honestly, the Israeli responses are becoming so boring. You know, they say the same thing every time. They're producing the responses by ChatGPT these days, and they spend so much money in the Foreign Ministry on propaganda, you'd think that they would actually come up with something original. I would want them to engage with the evidence, but they never engage with the evidence. They put the report into ChatGPT, and then they put out the standard response. So no one takes it seriously, and Jamie, you shouldn't either.
Good morning from me as well, and thank you very much for coming. Today we published our report analyzing Israel's conduct in the Gaza Strip pursuant to the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. The Commission concluded that Israel has committed genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza, and that it is continuing with that genocide. It is now almost 2 years since Israel launched its military campaign in the Gaza Strip in October 2023. This has been the most ruthless, prolonged, and widespread attack against the Palestinian people since 1948. Every day that passes, the killings and the starvation of the Palestinians continue. On 22nd August, the Famine Review Committee determined that famine is currently occurring in Gaza Governorate. At the time, the committee had projected famine thresholds to be crossed in Deir al-Balah and Khan Yunis governorates in the coming weeks. The goal of the Israeli government is abundantly clear as we continue to witness the destruction of Palestinians in Gaza. The Commission finds it is genocide. In our report, the Commission found that the Israeli authorities and Israeli security forces committed and are continuing to commit the following underlying acts of genocide against the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. 1, killing members of the group. 2, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. 3, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. And 4, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. On the specific intent of genocide, the Commission concludes that statements made by Israeli authorities are direct evidence of genocidal intent. The Commission also concludes that the pattern of conduct is circumstantial evidence for genocidal intent, and that genocidal intent was the only reasonable inference that could be drawn from a totality of the evidence. Therefore, the Commission concludes that the Israeli authorities and Israeli security forces have the genocidal intent to destroy, in whole or in part, the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. The Commission finds that the Israeli political and military leaders are agents of the State of Israel. Therefore, their acts are attributable to the State of Israel. The Commission therefore concludes that the State of Israel bears responsibility for the failure to prevent genocide, for the commission of genocide, and for the failure to punish genocide against the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. On incitement to genocide, the Commission concludes that many Israeli political and military leaders, including President Isaac Herzog, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and then Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, had incited the commission of genocide, and that Israeli authorities have failed to take action against them to punish this incitement. This report is the result of almost 2 years of work. The Commission began its investigation immediately on 7th October 2023 and has documented more than 16,000 pieces of evidentiary materials to date. The Commission has published 3 mandated reports and 3 thematic papers since 7th October 2023. And our findings in this report are based on the factual findings contained in all the reports that we had published since 7th October 23, as well as the findings from our upcoming mandated report to the General Assembly in October 2025. The analysis contained in this report relates solely to the determination of genocide in the Gaza Strip between October 2023 and July 2025. The Commission nevertheless raises the serious concern that the specific intent to destroy the Palestinians as a whole is guiding Israel in its operations in the rest of the occupied Palestinian territory, that is, the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. It is also important to note that the events in Gaza since 7th October 2023 have not occurred in isolation. They were preceded by decades of unlawful occupation and repression under an ideology requiring the removal of the Palestinian population from their lands and their replacement. We recommend all member states, especially those with influence over Israel, to effect an immediate halt to the killing and harming of civilians in Gaza, to guarantee humanitarian access to Gaza, and to prevent further destruction of life and suspend arms transfers or financial assistance that could contribute to further genocidal acts. The Genocide Convention was born out of humanity's darkest chapters. Today, we witness in real time how the promise of never again is broken and tested in the eyes of the world. The ongoing genocide in Gaza is a moral outrage and a legal emergency. Member states must act now. There is no need to wait for the International Court of Justice to declare it a genocide. All states are obligated to use whatever means within its power to prevent the commission of genocide. And so we urge member states to ensure accountability for any crimes that have been committed and prevent further crimes from being committed, not just in Gaza, but the entire occupied Palestinian territory. So that's the end of my statement. And my colleague Chris Sidoti and I are here to respond to your questions, if any. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pillay. Now we'll open the floor to questions for the chair and the fellow commissioner, Chris Sidoti. We'll start on the right side. Please identify yourself and the media outlet that you work for.
Laurent Siro, Swiss News Agency. Thanks for the press conference. First, you mentioned 4 out of 5 categories, components of genocide that are whose conditions are fulfilled in that case. Could you say why the 5th one has not been met? And then there were a lot of questions around your joint resignation in July. You have already mentioned a few reasons for that, but should we see also the fact that you concluded that the highest crime possible was reached and you couldn't go further in the scope and the extent of your investigation? Thank you.
I can perhaps take the first question. The 5th category of genocidal act is the transfer of children from one group to another group. And the reason why that was not established is because we have no evidence of it. This has been an issue in other situations. It is particularly a much debated issue in relation to the Russia-Ukraine dispute, where Ukrainian children were taken to Russia. but we have no evidence that that category, Category 5, has arisen in the case of Gaza or the West Bank.
Oh, and to the question. So yours is not the first time that we're hearing these questions about my retirement and Chris Sidoti's resignation and the third commissioners. Really, I'm so surprised by the reaction that I think that you could fault me for bad timing. So when I was appointed as chair to this commission, I said I'll stay for 2 years, and this is the 5th year. And mainly is because I personally believe you don't keep very old people around for too long. So I've reached that very old thing, and also medical issues that you get. And that's what my formal letter to the president says. I first went to see him and then explained the reason, sent him a letter. And the president of the Human Rights Council put that on the public website. And let me point out, my letter is dated well before the sanctions against Francisca. So we were not intimidated, pressured, or anything of the sort. Chris Sidoti and Miloon Kotari took their personal decisions to step down. Chris has made clear that he is available for re-election, but it would be a good opportunity for the council to have the opportunity to reconstitute this panel, because it's not like the usual panel where there's a term limit and then member states have an opportunity to change panelists. So you see all the noble motives we had, and I've been told out there that I'm very afraid of sanctions, and that's why that's not the case. Thank you.
Could I just add a personal note for me as well? My reasons for resignation are set out in full in the letter I sent to the President that the President released. The only relevant question is the date. We resigned effective of 3 November, and we haven't never been asked why. But the reason why is because we had a work program for this year to which we were committed, and we determined that we would complete our work program, including this report, before we actually resigned. So that's the only relevant question.
Thank you. Now we'll go again at the front row. Jamie Keaton from the Associated Press. Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Navi Pillay, and hi, Mr. Sidoti. Thank you for your report. I have 2 questions. The first is the Israeli Foreign Ministry today decried a distorted and false report and said that 3 individuals, so referring to the Commission of Inquiry, 3 individuals serving as Hamas proxies notorious for their openly anti-Semitic positions. Could you please comment on that, your response? And then my second question is, you talk about countries need to act. There has been a widespread condemnation across the world, not just from advocacy groups, but also governments and others. It seems to me that there's a number of countries that have been, let's say, more reticent to condemn Israel's behavior. I'm thinking particularly the United States and Germany. Could you please give us your appeal directly to those 2 countries, because you're saying countries in general, but could you be specific to those 2 countries, please? Thank you.
The first one is the antisemitic. Yeah.
Can I respond? I've got the Chair's permission, Jamie, to answer your first question. These reports should be taken seriously, but honestly, the Israeli responses are becoming so boring. You know, they say the same thing every time. They're producing the responses by ChatGPT these days, and they spend so much money in the Foreign Ministry on propaganda, you'd think that they would actually come up with something original. I would want them to engage with the evidence, but they never engage with the evidence. They put the report into ChatGPT, and then they put out the standard response. So no one takes it seriously, and Jamie, you shouldn't either.
This is 2 years' work on our part, painstakingly gathering the facts. We're very aware that we have a mandate to You can't hear me? All right. So we have a mandate that requires us to share this information to judicial institutions, and we have not only the ICC, but national judiciaries. There was one request. And so we are very, very careful to ensure that we personally investigate and verify every fact here. We even quote the figures released by Israel. And I was labeled anti-Semitic only when I took over as chair of this commission. I served 6 years as High Commissioner for Human Rights, and Israel invited me, the only High Commissioner, to go on a mission to Israel. And they mentioned the balance with which I come in. So I'm sorry to bring in the personal element, but as Chris said, I wish they'll tell us where we went wrong on these facts, or just cooperate with us if they had done any investigations. That's on the one. Yeah, I take your point about naming states. You know, we had 2 additional mandates given to us by the Human Rights Council 2 years ago, but we never received resources for them. Our staff, you know, it's a small number of staff overworking. We're concerned about their health, in fact. So we couldn't deliver on those 2, one of which was to produce a report on the transfer of military equipment by states. We started working on this. And so that's why we're not ready to name any states just yet. But we will get there once we get our resources. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay, in the front row, please go ahead.
I'm Mohammed Al-Finich from Algat TV. According to your report, so clearly Israel commit genocide. Can you please tell us, like those headlines you can mention as Israel commit genocide? And other things, we've been hearing for the last 2 years, some member of state, they said Israel, it might commit genocide. After your report, do you think now the things are clear about genocide in Gaza?
In the beginning, for instance, we were the first to denounce and condemn the Hamas attacks that took place on 7th October, and we named them as crimes against humanity, violations of international humanitarian law. And that's where we're thinking, because this is a Human Rights Council, that's the laws they provide, until we see the evidence like everybody else is watching the television and seeing it in real life. So it's the facts that moved us to investigate. We gather all the facts firstly, assess, verify, and then we see where the facts take us. Now the law on genocide, how we found the specific intent by connecting the pattern of the acts as well as statements by the leaders. We've enumerated the statements. They're very explicit on treating all Palestinians as Hamas operatives. So I'll have, Chris, would you like to do the second half of the question on the law itself?
Yeah. Navi mentioned the 4 categories of genocidal act that we found, and we indicated in the opening statement what those 4 categories are. But your question is well placed, because we didn't go into the detail that underlay our findings in those areas. And we didn't in our statement today because these facts are so well known. We have recited them in great length in our report. Our report, you've seen it, runs out around 80 pages in length. But the facts are 60,000, 65,000 dead at least, of whom at least 20,000 are children. These deaths are not accidents. They are not collateral damage. They are the direct consequence of a military strategy of saturation bombing and scorched earth when it comes to the infrastructure of Gaza and the people of Gaza. The numbers that are seriously, physically or mentally injured are enormous, and that's the second category. we are told, we haven't done comparisons with other wars, but we are told that the number of children that have had one or both legs and arms amputated is greater than in any other conflict this century. Certainly we know the number of children who have lost one or both parent. The trauma, the psychological trauma for children will last their whole lives. That's mental harm. The physical injury to people, the amputations, the illnesses, the compounding of disease because of a lack of medical treatment. The consequences of starvation, a child who is malnourished is affected for the rest of the child's life. Serious physical and mental harm. The destruction of conditions of life. We didn't examine the destruction of the residential towers last weekend. Of course, our report was finished before that. But that was just the culmination of what we did find, and that is the wholesale destruction of the infrastructure of Gaza. Residences, homes, hospitals, universities, schools, museums, churches, mosques, archaeological sites, roads, agricultural facilities, the fishing industry. Our reports over 2 years have built the full picture of the extent of the destruction. And the destruction is such, added in particular to the starvation policies, that the conditions of life in Gaza are unsupportable. The third category of genocidal act. And we, for the first time in a UN report, also examined the question of reproductive violence. And our report, published in March this year, dealt, amongst other things, with the destruction of fertility clinics and fertility facilities in Gaza, affecting the continuity of the Gaza population, the fourth category of genocidal act. So we have built our report on the basis of our own investigations. But we haven't taken second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand information. We haven't relied on other people's reports. We've relied on eyewitnesses, on digital evidence, photographic and video, satellite technology. We particularly have been assisted by the evidence of foreign medical workers who spent time in Gaza. They're not secondary evidence or hearsay evidence. They told us what they actually saw. And it's because of our own investigations that we came to the conclusions that we did. And that's the basis of the last part of your question. Why now? Why now? Because now, after painstakingly collected all of this evidence, now we are able to do what lawyers do. Collect evidence, find facts, apply the law. And this report is our conclusions.